Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow as he leaned over the hood of an old pickup truck in his small neighborhood garage. The scent of motor oil, grease, and metal hung heavy in the air, the kind of smell that clung to his clothes long after he left work. To most people, he was just a mechanic, a man who patched up engines, replaced brakes, and kept cars on the road for folks who couldn't afford dealership prices. But to Marcus, every bolt he tightened and every wire he tested was practice, training for something far bigger. When the last customer of the day drove off, Marcus locked the shop, grabbed his worn-out backpack, and headed home. His real work waited for him in his cramped two-car garage, a space cluttered with toolboxes, metal scraps, and notebooks, filled with sketches and calculations. In the middle of it all sat his pride, a half-built prototype of a new electric car engine. Most nights stretched into mornings as he worked under the flickering light bulb, his fingers blackened with grease, his mind buzzing with equations. He'd spent years studying on his own, poring over online courses, reading engineering manuals, and experimenting with salvaged parts. His dream wasn't just to build an engine, but to change the industry itself. An affordable, powerful electric motor that could make clean transportation accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. But to the outside world, Marcus was invisible. Customers saw only a mechanic in oil-stained overalls. Investors never even knew his name. Still, every time his prototype hummed to life for a few seconds longer than before, Marcus felt a quiet fire inside him. He was close, closer than anyone could guess. And soon, the world that ignored him would have no choice but to pay attention. The next morning, Marcus was tightening the bolts on a customer's minivan when a sleek black Mercedes pulled up in front of his small garage. The car gleamed under the sun, spotless, the kind of luxury vehicle Marcus rarely saw in his neighborhood. From the driver's seat stepped out a man in an expensive tailored suit, shoes polished so bright they reflected the light. He wore an air of entitlement like it was part of his wardrobe. "Are you the mechanic?" the man asked, his tone dripping with disdain as his eyes swept the garage. He wrinkled his nose at the grease-stained floor and mismatched tools scattered on the workbench. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and nodded. "Yeah, I am. What can I do for you?" The man chuckled, shaking his head. "Honestly, I was told this was the only place nearby to look at my car, but I don't know if I should even bother. Doesn't exactly scream quality, you know?" He gestured around the small garage, comparing it in his mind to the sterile, marble-floored service centers he was used to. Marcus stayed calm, though his jaw tightened slightly. "If it's your engine making that whining sound, I can take a look. Won't take long." The man sighed, reluctantly handing over the keys. "Fine, but be careful. This car is worth more than your entire shop." He smirked, as if expecting Marcus to be impressed. While Marcus leaned under the hood, expertly checking the problem, the man paced the garage, speaking loudly into his phone about closing million-dollar deals and wasting time in dumpy places like this. Every so often, his eyes flicked back at Marcus, and he muttered comments under his breath. Just a grease monkey, wasting his talent on nuts and bolts. Marcus didn't respond. He had heard it all before. The assumptions, the casual insults, the way men like this looked at him and saw nothing but a mechanic with dirty hands. What the investor didn't know was that those same hands had been building something that could disrupt the very industry he poured his money into. Marcus tightened the last bolt, closed the hood, and handed the man the keys. "Fixed. You're good to go." The man didn't even say thank you. He slipped into the driver's seat, muttering, "Amazing what people settle for in life." As the Mercedes roared away, Marcus stood in the dust cloud it left behind, shaking his head. He had no idea that this arrogant stranger would soon play an unexpected role in his future, and that the tables were going to turn in a way no one could imagine. A week later, Marcus found himself standing in a very different setting than his oil-stained garage. He had been invited to a tech innovation expo downtown, an event that showcased new ideas in renewable energy and transportation. For months, he had been secretly working on his side project, a fully electric engine system that was cheaper, more efficient, and longer lasting than anything on the market. Tonight, he would finally reveal it. The expo hall buzzed with activity. Bright screens flashed futuristic cars, investors mingled with young engineers, and reporters snapped photos of prototypes under spotlights. Marcus arrived in simple jeans and a plain shirt, carrying nothing but a laptop bag and a calm confidence that came from years of hard work. He knew people would overlook him at first. They always did. But the work would speak louder than appearances. As he signed in at the registration desk, he spotted a familiar figure across the room. The same wealthy investor from his garage was there, sipping champagne and laughing with a group of executives. He wore a sharp navy blue suit and carried himself like he owned the place. When his eyes landed on Marcus, his expression shifted into confusion, then amusement. "You again," the investor scoffed, walking over. "What's a mechanic doing at a tech expo? Looking for someone's car to wash?" The group of executives chuckled politely at the jab. Marcus didn't flinch. He offered a small, steady smile. "I'm here to present." The investor's eyebrows shot up. Then he laughed outright. "Present? Here? Don't tell me you're trying to play inventor now. Stick to wrenches, my friend." The sting of his words lingered in the air, but Marcus didn't let them sink into his spirit. He had learned long ago that some people would never see past their own arrogance. Instead, he simply said, "We'll see who's laughing at the end of the night," and walked past him toward the presentation area. The investor shook his head, muttering to his friends, "Unbelievable. This guy thinks he's going to compete with real innovators." What he didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just competing. He was about to change the game entirely. The presentation hall filled quickly as attendees settled into their seats, waiting for the next speaker. Rows of polished prototypes gleamed under the spotlights. But tucked away at the end of the lineup was Marcus's setup. A modest display with a single engine model mounted on a steel frame, wires neatly arranged, and a simple banner that read, "Sustainable Future Powertrain." It didn't look flashy compared to the multi-million-dollar exhibits beside him. But Marcus didn't care about presentation. He cared about results. When his name was announced, a few people glanced at their programs with raised brows, whispering quietly, "Who's this guy?" The wealthy investor from earlier leaned back in his chair with a smug grin, arms crossed, as if waiting for Marcus to embarrass himself. Marcus walked onto the stage without hesitation. He began not with grand claims, but with a story. He spoke about the countless nights he spent fixing cars in his small garage, about how customers often asked if electric vehicles would ever be affordable for working-class families. That question had driven him to tinker, experiment, and finally build something new. Not for billionaires, but for everyday people. He revealed his prototype engine, explaining how it used fewer rare materials, charged faster, and lasted nearly twice as long as conventional electric batteries. As he broke down the technical aspects, skeptical frowns in the audience softened into curiosity. Engineers leaned forward in their seats, and journalists began scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Then came the live demo. Marcus connected the engine to a simple car frame he had brought, pressed a button, and the system roared quietly to life. The dashboard lit up, the wheels spun smoothly, and a display showed an energy output far beyond what current industry leaders claimed was possible. The audience gasped, then erupted into applause. The investor's smirk faltered. He shifted in his seat, his confident posture shrinking as he realized the man he mocked was no ordinary mechanic. Marcus didn't just understand engines. He had outpaced some of the world's most celebrated innovators. By the time Marcus stepped off stage, a line of journalists, engineers, and investors had already formed, eager to speak with him. The applause still echoed, and the investor who once dismissed him now sat frozen, his face pale, realizing that his arrogance had blinded him to a true genius. After the thunderous applause from his presentation, Marcus barely had time to catch his breath before he was surrounded. Journalists shoved microphones in his direction. Engineers wanted to see his blueprints, and representatives from major car companies offered him their cards. The same people who hadn't even looked at his booth earlier were now desperate to speak with him. Marcus handled it calmly. He answered questions with clarity, smiled politely, and even laughed when someone asked how long it took him to create such a breakthrough. "A lifetime," he said simply, and the crowd chuckled, though they could tell he wasn't exaggerating. In the back of the room, the rich investor who had insulted him earlier tried to push forward, his usual confidence faltering. When he finally reached Marcus, he forced a smile and extended his hand. "Impressive work," he said, his voice tight. "I may have been too quick to judge. I'd be interested in discussing investment opportunities. Marcus looked at the hand but didn't shake it right away. The silence that followed was heavy, and a few people nearby turned to watch. Finally, Marcus replied, "You know, when I was a mechanic, you wouldn't even look me in the eye. Now that I've proven myself, suddenly I'm worth your time?" His voice wasn't angry. It was calm, steady, and cutting. The investor's face reddened, and he stammered something about misunderstandings and business being business. But Marcus wasn't interested. Instead, he turned back to the group of engineers and students who were waiting eagerly for him, choosing to spend his energy on people who believed in ideas, not appearances. Word of his invention spread quickly. That night, videos of his demonstration went viral, appearing on tech blogs and news outlets around the world. Headlines read, "Unknown mechanic stuns industry with revolutionary electric engine," and "Game changer in clean energy comes from unexpected innovator." As Marcus scrolled through his phone in his quiet hotel room, the notifications pinging nonstop, he felt a wave of relief. He hadn't just proved himself to an arrogant man in a suit. He had proved to the world that brilliance and hard work don't come wrapped in wealth or status. For the first time, he began to see that this wasn't just his victory. It was the beginning of something much larger. The morning after the presentation, Marcus woke up to find his inbox overflowing. Emails from reporters, investors, universities, and even government representatives filled his screen. Some wanted interviews, others wanted to collaborate, and a few were bold enough to ask if they could outright buy his patents. He ignored the offers of easy money. Instead, he focused on the few messages that really mattered, from young engineers and mechanics who told him how much his story inspired them. One student wrote, "I almost gave up on my engineering degree because I felt like I didn't belong. But seeing you up there yesterday showed me I do." Marcus read that one twice, smiling quietly. By the afternoon, news vans were parked outside his workshop back home. Local kids on bikes crowded around, pointing and whispering, as if the small garage where he once fixed rusted pickup trucks had turned into a shrine. Inside, Marcus sat with his closest friend Jamal, going over plans. "I don't want to just sell this to some big corporation that will bury it," Marcus said, shaking his head. "This tech could change everything. The way we drive, the way we think about energy. I need to protect it." Word kept spreading. A university in California invited him to give a lecture. A clean energy nonprofit offered to help scale his design for public transportation. Even international media picked up the story, dubbing him the mechanic who outsmarted the giants. Meanwhile, the arrogant investor who had belittled him tried to spin his own narrative, posting on social media that he had always believed in Marcus's potential. But the truth was obvious to everyone who had been at the expo. He had mocked him, dismissed him, and now looked like a fool scrambling for credit. Marcus didn't respond to the noise. He was too busy sketching out improvements, testing prototypes, and meeting with people who genuinely wanted to push the world forward. For the first time in his life, doors were opening everywhere. Not because of his background, not because of his name, but because the world finally saw what he had built with his own hands. The kid from a dusty neighborhood garage was now on the brink of changing the future of transportation. And deep down, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. A few months later, the world looked very different for Marcus. The garage where he once patched up old trucks had transformed into the headquarters of his own company, a buzzing workspace filled with young engineers, designers, and mechanics who believed in his vision. The sign out front read, "True Volt Motors," a name Marcus had chosen to remind himself of where it all started, with the truth and a spark. On the day of the grand launch, hundreds of people packed into a converted warehouse downtown. The media was everywhere, cameras flashing as Marcus walked onto the stage in his usual work clothes, jeans, boots, and a plain button-up shirt. No fancy suit, no attempt to hide where he came from. That was part of the statement. You didn't have to look the part to change the world. The lights dimmed, and behind him, a sleek, silent prototype rolled onto the stage, his fully electric car, designed from the ground up with his revolutionary battery system. The crowd gasped as he explained how it worked, how affordable it could be, and how it could outlast anything the major car companies were making. And then came the part no one expected. As the applause died down, Marcus's team wheeled out a second car. This one wasn't for sale. It was being donated to a community center in his old neighborhood, a place where kids could learn mechanics, robotics, and engineering for free. Because genius doesn't just live in boardrooms, Marcus said into the microphone. It lives in garages, in classrooms, in kids who just need someone to believe in them. From the front row, the arrogant investor who had once laughed in his face sat frozen, his jaw tight. Cameras panned toward him, catching his discomfort as Marcus continued. Without ever mentioning the man's name, Marcus's words cut through. Never underestimate someone because of where they come from or what they look like. Potential doesn't care about stereotypes. The room erupted in applause, not just for the car, but for the man behind it, the mechanic who had turned rejection into revolution. Marcus smiled, scanning the crowd, not with arrogance, but with pride. He had stayed true to himself, lifted others up along the way, and proved to the world that real power comes from resilience, vision, and heart. That night, headlines around the world told the story. From garage to global, mechanic redefines the future of cars. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment as the cheers washed over him. For the first time, he felt it fully. Not just success, but justice. He hadn't just built cars, he had built a legacy.